It is MMA Weekly Radio. I am Damon Martin, and we are joined today by Strikeforce fighter, maybe one day UFC fighter, Miesha Tate. Miesha, welcome back. How is everything?
Everything's going great. Just got back from Brazil a couple days ago, and I'm still on Brazilian time, so I'm like 6 hours ahead. So I have a little bit of jet lag, but other than that, happy to see family and really missed my dogs while I was there. So of course, happy to see them as well.
Definitely. And you were actually in Brazil originally for the fight, but you stayed extra time, right?
Yeah, Brian and I were both down there for the fight. He cornered a couple guys from the Northwest, and we wanted to stay. We've always wanted to go to Brazil. It's like, who doesn't, So it was our first time going down there, and we wanted to really experience the culture and also get some great training in, and we were able to do that. So we stayed for about a month, and it was a great experience. I mean, we got to do everything from go see the big Christ statue to training at X Gym with Master Silvio Bering, and also at Minotauro's gym. So we got to, hang out a little bit with those guys, and everyone was really warm and welcoming. We saw Anderson, teaching classes there, and it was a really, really cool experience. Definitely got to learn a lot, not just about Brazil, but, what, their training is like down there in the gyms and the country and the favelas and Portuguese and everything. So it was really a pleasant experience.
Definitely a worthwhile trip, then, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Miesha, over the last couple days, we've heard all the rumors and everything about, Ronda Rousey is apparently going to be the first woman signed to the UFC, and we've also known that Strikeforce is more than likely going to come to an end after January. First off, before we talk anything about a UFC, if this all is true and Strikeforce is really over, you've been a person that's fought for Strikeforce for a long time. What did that organization mean to you in your career?
Well, Strikeforce has been a huge stepping stone in developing women's MMA and a huge part of my career. I think I had my first fight with Strikeforce against Elena Maxwell, and I think that was in it was either 2007 or 2008. 2008 probably, yeah, 2008. And so, I've been fighting for that organization for a long time. Actually, I believe I'm their longest signed female. And I'm going to kind of miss it, If it's all coming to a close, it's going to be kind of sad. But it looks like it's moving on to bigger and better things. So they say when one door closes, another one opens. And I'm really ecstatic to see that through Strikeforce and through also Invicta FC, the women have not only been able to prove that we can fight, but there's actually some depth and numbers and quite a few talented young women out there that want to get in there and perform on the ultimate stage, which would be the UFC. And it looks like that's all coming to a head, which has been a dream for me since I really got into this, to make that kind of progress and break into an organization that has not been welcoming of female mixed martial arts. It's so exciting.
And when you talk about Strikeforce, we know it's taken Dana White a number of years to come around on women's fighting. Whatever it was, he finally came around, and it looks like, we're going to see a lot of great women's fights in the UFC in 2013. But I'll ask you, Miesha, for a person like Scott Coker, who has always been behind women's fighting, if I remember correctly, one of the first fights they did in Strikeforce in MMA was Gina Carano's first fight. So, obviously, they've been behind women's fighting for a while. It's got to be great to have a person, an executive in this business, kind of like Gary Shaw was for Elite XC, that believed in the women from day one. They didn't have to be convinced. He was convinced on day one.
Absolutely, and I have to give that man a lot of credit. He was behind women's MMA and women's fighting, period, before many people were, and he took a risk, and it paid off. And I'm so glad that he was willing to do that he was willing to put his own neck on the line and say, hey, look, I believe in these ladies, and you guys should too, and I'm going to not only promote them, but I'm going to invest in them, I'm going to market them, and I'm going to give them every opportunity to succeed. And without him doing that, who knows if we would be here today? I highly doubt that we would be. So, I have to give a huge thanks to Scott Coker.
Definitely. Now, with that said, the news of the hour, so to speak, is the transition of the women to the UFC. In some, point in time, obviously, we know Ronda, is the one that has been focused on in the beginning, but obviously we're talking about the women's division as a whole, at least 135 pounds. I remember when Zuffa bought Strikeforce, Strikeforce, we talked that night about what it meant for the women's division. There was a lot of worry, you know, would the women be going away? Were they going to support the women? And I think they have in a big way. And now with this move, this is another big one. I mean, what does it mean to you as a fighter to finally, I mean, to get a chance to fight in the octagon? I mean, that's got to be something cool.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, it's more than cool. I don't know if there's really a word that can be put to it, but I mean, it's like something when you work so hard and you have this mission on your mind and so many people told you it's not going to happen. I don't know how many times I've heard that women will never fight in the UFC, and I've heard it straight from the horse's mouth. Like Dana White has said time and time again, it's never going to happen. He was not a believer. And, you know, that's something that I've been battling for a long time since I started wrestling when I was 15, you know, and doing male, you know, considered male-dominated sports or male-oriented sports. You know, I started wrestling, oh, well, you shouldn't do that, or you can't do that, or you can't be successful with that, or why would you want to do that? You know, and then transitioning into fighting right when I started college, and I wasn't familiar with mixed martial arts at that point, but as I grew as an amateur and became pro and I learned a lot about the UFC and whatnot, it was always a dream of mine. But so many people scoffed at me and was like, you know, really, seriously, like girls fighting, how stupid. And why would you want to do that again? Well, you don't want to mess your face up. Like all these negative things that people want to try to break you of your dreams and want to try to tell you, well, that's not possible, that you shouldn't hope for that, you shouldn't go for that, you shouldn't, and you can't because you're a girl, you're a woman, and it's just so rewarding in so many ways to be able to say, like, I told you so, like, you were wrong, like, I'm the one that put in the time and the work, and, you know, not just me, but all the girls, I think, will probably feel this way. You know, we put the time and the work and the effort in, and we put on these spectacular fights, and we've really triumphed so far to actually get accepted into UFC. It's crazy, and it's really feels like a big accomplishment, and I'm just really, really, really excited to be a part of it.
There were a lot of women that helped pioneer, you know, mixed martial arts, female mixed martial arts, women's mixed martial arts. But, you know, we can point to a few occasions where really it took to the forefront and obviously got on the radar of somebody like Dana White in the UFC. You look at Gina Carano, her coming up, fighting on CBS. And then I think at the biggest moment that's happened in the women's sport was the rivalry with you and Ronda Rousey. And if Ronda is indeed going to the UFC, I think everyone is naturally going to, you know, assume at some point down the road we're going to see that rematch. How much do you feel like that rivalry in and of itself, bringing the women to the forefront, headlining that show? I mean, I look at all the different things that have happened. I know a lot of people were looking at Ronda, and I believe, you know, she deserves a lot of the credit, no doubt about it. But I look at that rivalry as really the seminal moment that kind of changed things. I think that, to me, was the moment when Dana went from, yeah, women's fighting's okay, but I could never see it in the UFC, to, you know, yeah, I think one day these girls could headline a card.
I think that definitely was a very pinnacle moment for Dana. I think it was publicized well. We had good chemistry going into the fight. A lot of people were really interested, and I think that fight said a lot because it made money, it drew attention, and it proved that everything that was ever disputed about, you know, can we put on entertaining fights? Can we actually be skilled? Can we sell tickets? Can we get people to watch us? You know, we accomplished all those things inside that fight, and Dana really took note of it. And because it was so highly publicized, you know, I think it got a lot of attention, and that's exactly what we needed. We just needed that platform, and that's, again, where Scott really gave that to us. And I don't know, I mean, it's all been, you know, it's not just Ronda, it's not just myself, that's for sure. And, I mean, if Ronda's coming over to the UFC, obviously there's going to be, you know, a division around that. It's not just Ronda. I know Ronda's getting a lot of the credit and whatnot, but really she didn't have a lot to do with from the ground up. You know, we're at the top of the mountain now. That's kind of how I feel anyways, with this accomplished coming into the UFC. We've kind of reached that final goal. And so we had to start at the bottom of the mountain. And like you said, a lot of the pioneers, you know, Tara, Marloes, Molly Hessel, you know, like the girls that really were fighting back in the day before we were making any kind of money, or really there wasn't much publicity or much acceptance of it. And we were definitely very, very far away from getting in the UFC. I'm talking 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. We were fighting for this right here, right now. And so, I mean, like I said, she's getting a lot of the credit and the limelight, but, people who follow the sport understand that there was a lot more behind getting to this point. So I hope that people can recognize that and give all the women that have worked really hard some credit.
Do you mind, Miesha, being a bit of the spokesperson for the women's division? What I mean by that is you've always been outspoken for the respect and the things that you ladies deserve, but also like in Zoila Gurgel's situation a few weeks ago with Bellator, you stepped right up and defended her and kind of but took her back when she had a rough situation with Bellator. I mean, it seems like you're not afraid to take on the tough subjects and kind of put yourself out there in those situations. And I think the sport needs people like that. I think the sport needs people that will stand up and stand up for what's right.
Well, I hope so. I hope people can respect me for having my opinion, whether it differs from others. I feel that I should be able to voice it. That's another wonderful thing about America is everyone's entitled to their opinion. And, I feel that I have the right to speak my mind. And so I was going to, I still feel what Bellator did was wrong. I think that as their only female champion, that she should have been treated with a lot more respect, and then that her fight should have been made as a highly anticipated fight, and her highly anticipated comeback after such a severe injury and whatnot. I thought it was pretty insulting to put the champion on the undercard, regardless if she was defending her belt or not. They tried to say, well, because she wasn't defending her belt, we're going to put her on the undercard. And I said, well, have you ever done that to any of your male champions? No. And, you know what I mean? It just was, she just seemed like she was kind of sloughed off. And, after all the bills that she had with that torn ACL, they promised to help her medical expenses and whatnot. And from what I've heard, they haven't followed through with that at all. And then to put her on the undercard, again, hurt her financially because, she's going to lose a lot of sponsorship money, because the sponsors want that television. They want that kind of coverage. So they're not going to pay the same money if you put them on the undercard. She's fighting in her hometown, and all these things which just didn't make sense to me why they would do that to her. And so I felt like it was important that we stick together, and that's how I've always felt about women's MMA. I mean, yeah, it's an individual sport, and we fight each other, but when it really comes down to it, we have to kind of have this, we have to kind of stick together, because if we're all just pulling each other apart, I don't think it serves the purpose of developing women's MMA as a whole. We have to all work together for the same overall goal. Despite our individual goals along the way, all of us kind of have the same goal, so in a sense we have to work together, and that was just part of me sticking up for what I believe was right, and not letting her just stand there alone. And I wanted to draw attention to it as well. I wanted people to know what was going on, and I wanted people to kind of give Bellator a hard time, so hopefully they won't do that again.
Yeah, definitely agree. With that said, I know nothing's a done deal right now. We haven't heard until the UFC comments and people got contracts in hands and fights have been announced. Nothing is official. But if we're looking at this as 2013, the move of the women's division over into the UFC, I mean, I'll ask you kind of a two-part question. How excited are you personally if this all goes down and you become a part of the UFC, but also for the prospects? And what I mean by that are, headlining cards and getting that pay-per-view respect. I mean, all the things that the women have battled for to finally have it come true. It just seems like it's just, I mean, that because you've literally seen the growth of women's MMA before our very eyes. It's not something we can say about the guys because it's always kind of been them. But the women, we've literally seen them fight, crawl, scratch their way into this position, and it's something cool to really see.
Yeah, it's been amazing, and to be part of the journey, not only to just witness it, but be a part of it, has been really, really cool for me. And I don't know, what the future holds, I mean, I believe we're all coming over to the UFC. That's what Dana said, and obviously, he wants to develop a division at 135. I think that's where most female fighters, I think it's the deepest division. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that 135 is the most stacked division. And, he was really impressed with myself. Dana's been really impressed with myself, with Ronda, with Julie Kedzie. He also loved that fight. So I think Dana's finally becoming aware that there's a lot more women than he realized. He just kind of shut us out and was like, oh, there's just no depth, there's no depth. And I think Invicta has really helped prove that wrong. And he's been kind of smacked blatantly in the face with, you're wrong, buddy. Like, there is depth, and we fight, and we can do everything that the men can do. We're working hard, and we get people interested. And so, I can't wait to see the first women's MMA fight. I would love to be a part of the first women's MMA fight in the UFC, but if I'm not, I'm not going to focus on the negative. I've been thinking about that a lot and just saying, my goal was to get into the UFC regardless. And at this point, I consider myself in the UFC. It's happening. Dana's made it very clear that it's happening. And, amongst personal talks that I've had with himself and Sean and everyone, definitely I'm pretty sure that UFC is in my future, so I'm very happy about that.
So last question I'll ask you, Miesha. The rivalry is there. We know at some point the rematch is going to happen. I know you mentioned after your last fight taking some time off and, getting your training and just, kind of getting your mind right and all these things. But be honest, how big would a Miesha Tate Ronda Rousey fight be in the UFC?
Wow. The rematch in itself I thought was going to be huge, whether it was even in Strikeforce. But if it was in the UFC, I could just only imagine how much attention it would get. Our rivalry is very real. And I know a lot of people don't believe that Ronda can be beaten. They think that she's just untouchable and whatnot. But I beg to differ. I've been in there with her before. I know what it feels like. And I don't care what anyone says. It was a very competitive fight, until she got the armbar. We had 4.5 minutes of war. It was not, entirely one-sided. I'm the only person to make it outside a minute with her. I'm the only person to defend an armbar from her, and I'm the only person to get her to go backwards in the cage. I hit her some really good shots. She took me down. I go for a guillotine, I get her back, she gets back up, we're scrambling, and it was a great battle. And I feel like I've done a lot of analyzing since that fight of myself, and I really tried to break myself down as a fighter and see the areas that I really need to work on and come up with a game plan that I think would better suit me rather than just going out there with too much emotion, which I know that I did the first time, and I can admit that. And develop myself as a fighter, and that's also part of the reason why I wanted to take almost a year off, so that I can take that time to analyze and then apply that, learn about myself and really try to become a better fighter. And, so that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just training, and I'm training a lot of technique. I'm training a lot of trying to get my skill sets better, more well-rounded, strengthen my weaknesses, strengthen my strengths. I'm just trying to evolve as a fighter so that when I do fight her again, and even in my next fight, whether it's her or not, that I'll be a much improved fighter. And so if I do get that rematch in the UFC, it's going to be one hell of a fight. And I don't know. I can't wait for it. It just makes me really excited, just even thinking about it.
I'm excited now. See, I'm already anticipating it now. We don't even know for sure if it's happening. I'm already excited. So, see, it's going to work. It's going to work. Well, Miesha, this is an exciting time for the women. Obviously, we're excited to see what happens in 2013. So thank you so much for taking the time. I know you don't have a fight around the corner, but tell people where they can find you and check you out and see what you're up to. I know obviously you've been in Brazil and you're always really good on Twitter, but the people that support you, I give you the chance to shout them out.
Oh, for sure. I'd love to give a huge thank you to Yakima Mixed Martial Arts. That's where I train. It's where I very first started training. Love the people there, great people. My coach, Rich Guerin, and my boyfriend and coach, Brian Caraway. And, also to the people that I just met in Brazil, I got to hang out and make a really good friend, a lifelong friend, Duda Yankovic. She's a, former world champion boxer. She's an amazing girl, amazing fighter, and she's recently transitioned to MMA, so I was fortunate enough to be able to help her a lot with her ground game while I was down there, and that was just amazing. And her husband, Douglas, and ex-gym, Master Silvio Bering, who I belted under now, which I'm really proud of that, and also Minotauro's gym, and everyone that we met there that was so kind. Really appreciate that hospitality. And also thank you to my fans, friends, family, everyone who supports me. Love you guys, my sponsors. And last but not least, you, Damon. Appreciate always, giving me some coverage and press.
Always.
And then just follow me on Twitter, @Miesha Tate. I'm pretty good at at reading and responding to most of my tweets, or at least I try to be. But even if I don't respond, I do read most of them. So, yeah, hit me up.
Absolutely. Miesha, it is always a pleasure to catch up. Hopefully the next time we talk, even though we talk pretty often, hopefully next time we'll talk, I'll be able to officially say Miesha Tate, UFC women's fighter. I think that would be a great way to introduce you next time.
Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?
I like it. I like the sound of that.